I'm glad to introduce Dr. Brian Nosek, who is here to tell us about his career path for the SSCP APS How Did I Get Here video series. Dr. Nosek received his Ph.D. in social psychology from Yale University in 2002. Dr. Nosek is a professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Virginia. He investigates factors such as implicit bias, social judgment, and ideology that contribute to gaps between personal and organizational values and practices. Dr. Nosek co-founded Project Implicit, a multi-university collaboration about implicit cognition. He also co-founded and directs the Center for Open Science, which aims to increase openness, integrity, and reproducibility of scientific research. Dr. Nosek has received awards from the International Social Cognition Network and the Society for the Psychological Study of Social Issues. Dr. Nosek, please describe your career path and tell us about any obstacles or barriers that you overcame along the way. In addition, tell us what has surprised you about your job or jobs and what you wish you had known earlier about these types of positions.
Well, thanks very much for having me on this. I'm pleased to do it. And I feel like I have an unusual career path. So I'll just sort of blabber on about the things that, at least as I see it, sort of reflecting back, and maybe that will be of interest to someone, I don't know. But I started with interest in psychology, like many do, of taking courses as distractions from my computer engineering major courses, and then starting to realize that my engineering class grades were declining rapidly because I was spending all of my time thinking about the psychology courses that I was in. And at that point, switched majors and said, this is a future for me. I'm really interested in understanding human behavior. And what quickly became a core interest for me was trying to understand the gap between our intentions and our actions, our values and our practices. Why do we want to do some things and end up doing other things? And I think that would characterize my broad interests of being a human, and then my research interest, and then my practical interests of how to be the best person and do the best science I can. And so I went to graduate school at Yale to work with Mahzarin Banaji. And the work that she and Tony Greenwald had gotten started a few years prior to my arrival was focused on implicit bias, which really sort of got to the core of this interest of mine of people having thoughts and feelings outside of their awareness and control that might be influencing their behaviors without them even recognizing it, and sometimes leading them to do things that might be counter to what their intentions are, their values are, their goals are. So I got very excited about that kind of work to try to understand this general principle. And in doing that research, found that the methodology of our approach was as interesting as the questions that we were studying. So the implicit association test was a tool that was Tony Greenwald had just invented prior to my entering grad school. So we got to start to do some of the initial testing of this as a tool. And while we're doing the research on implicit bias, in my methodology courses, we're thinking a lot about the challenges of doing good research, of the fact that there is publication bias and not everything gets through the publication process, and the published literature might be a biased representation of the actual research literature. I was reading about how research is low powered and how we don't have, we're not actually able to make the discoveries we think we're making because the research isn't powered enough in order to detect those things. And so thinking about that methodology concerns as thinking about the values of science. What is it that we're trying to do with science? How can I do my science better? Sort of, for me, has been a sort of a two-layered investment in the gap between values and practices. So implicit bias is looking at how individual decisions, the research application about how values might differ from our daily behaviors. And then how do we study that while trying to maximize scientific values in our daily practices. So this is sort of a weird way toward the career path, which is we said, let's let's maximize the power of our research. We can do this because these tools are interesting. Let's do them online. And so I created the website called Project Implicit in grad school. And then that became quite successful as a mechanism for data collection in addition to being education about implicit bias. And so we formed a nonprofit around that. And by the time I finished my graduate work, doing the things that people do to try to be successful as a graduate student in order to earn a job, right? Doing as much research as I can, having as many ideas as I can, seeing what I can produce in ways of contributions. I landed at University of Virginia as an assistant professor on the coattails of my spouse, Bethany Teachman, who got a job and then helped get me a job. And the website and the nonprofit that we formed around it became a basis of actively disseminating research about implicit bias and a very strong means of improving our methodology for studying implicit bias. We have we have 1 million people a year visit the website now. We have millions and millions of data points. It just changed how we thought about what kinds of questions we could ask and really opened up. Just the experience of doing it opened up my mind to the opportunities that technology provides to do psychological science better. And because I had a computing background, my lab became very technical. And we thought about each year about ways that we could improve our infrastructure, the tools that we use to do our science better and make bigger contributions. And so we always had this sort of ideal of closing the gap between values and practices. And the path to getting there has been very flexible. I haven't had this objective in mind of I'm going to do all of these X things by the end of my career. Rather, I want to contribute as much as I can to this sort of core problem that I'm interested in, values and practices. And so each of the decisions along the way sort of has been with regard to sort of the realities of opportunity in the moment in thinking about how can I get to that broader objective. How can I maximize my progress on that broader objective? So during my early faculty work, we got a grant to support Project Implicit. We developed that infrastructure, we expanded it. I started to apply for grants in 2006, 2007 to expand that framework to make it easier for all researchers to use it, to do their own behavioral research, and to make it easier to share data and materials and protocols and register your designs and things. But in 2006, 2007, all of those grants failed. There was very little interest in the granting agency. Actually, I shouldn't say there was little interest. There was polarized interest in the granting agencies, where some reviewers would say, oh, it's so important to build these tools for, data sharing would be so valuable for people to do. And then other reviewers saying, but researchers don't like to share their data. Why would we fund this? So I had a series of obstacles in that regard of thinking I have the capacity to contribute in this way. I have some ability to manage computing projects. I don't do any programming myself anymore since a long time, but I can help facilitate the development of such infrastructure. I see that as a way to start to close some of these gaps between what we think of as scientific research being transparent and reproducible versus what we're doing day to day. And I just was not able to make a convincing, compelling case to the granting agencies at that point in time. So it just, the career trajectory was, okay, I can't get those funded. I'll just do the work we can do in the lab, the best we can do it. But then the twist for the career path was in 2011, we started 2 projects in the lab. One was called the Reproducibility Project, where we decided it would be interesting to evaluate the extent to which our published literature is reproducible. This was at a time where there's already starting to emerging discussions about interests in reproducibility. So we started a collaborative project starting in the lab and department, but very quickly realized, there's a lot of people that would be interested in looking at this question. And investigating reproducibility, especially doing replications, isn't so easy, and we can't do a lot of it ourselves. So let's make it a group project. So we made it a group project and put it online. At the same time as we were starting a technology project, just with the resources we had available in the lab, to create this infrastructure that we had not been able to get grant support for, and that was called the Open Science Framework. That second project was led by a graduate student in the lab named Jeff Spies, who had a software development background. And the reproducibility project was a group project. We put both of those online, and they started to get some media interest because there was lots of general interest in these issues of reproducibility, and people thought this was an unusual or interesting approach. And then funders started calling. So it turned from 15 failed grants in a row to people just started calling, saying, "This is an interesting project. You want some money?" And we said, yes, we do. That the opportunity, again, it's sort of this opportunity presents itself. It wasn't that we planned to start a nonprofit called the Center for Open Science that was a technology company that would, as of today, have 70 employees and building all these tools and doing all these things. That wasn't the objective at that point in time. The objective was that broader goal and little steps that we could take with the resources we had available to us to try to move toward that broader goal. And each of those steps presented new opportunities, sometimes barriers, like others aren't interested, others don't like the idea, others don't like the fact that we're doing these replications or whatever, but also presented opportunities of, this is interesting, we would like to join, we want to collaborate with you, we want to support it, whatever it is. And so we just sort of went with the opportunities as they presented themselves, evaluated them for what impact could they have, and jumped. So in 2013, we launched the Center for Open Science. Jeff and I were the co-founders for that. And then starting in that summer of 2013, I went on research leave from the university and just personal leave. And I've been on leave now for 3 years. And I still have my lab and haven't been adding new students, but sort of trying to maintain the collaborations, at least with the grad students, to advance their careers. But most of my time now is in this nonprofit company that is mission driven. We're building free and open tools to support scientific research, make it easier for researchers to make their data and materials available if they want to, make it easy for them to register their designs so they can do strong confirmatory analyses if they want to, and then connect all of the research services that support research not just in psychology but across the scientific life cycle together. So the scale with which our ambition could expand has just been sort of responsive to the opportunities as they present themselves. So I don't, all of that has been, you asked what has surprised me about the job. All of those things surprised me. I didn't anticipate any of this stuff in the sense of what we could actually get done. And what I have appreciated or enjoyed about the process is that the just openness to trying it has been rewarded. Not every time, lots of barriers, lots of people saying that'll never work, that you can't do research on the internet was a phrase I heard a lot when we first put Project Implicit online. You can't get people to share data is something I hear a lot. I still hear a lot, right? There are people and systems and cultures that aren't yet aligned with the kinds of things that I think would be great to do. That's fine. We're supposed to have diversity of opinions and argue about these things. But the thing that I am happy about in terms of my own style is being responsive and mission driven. I have a thing I'm trying to get done, and just been trying to be responsive to the environment, both respecting where I am not able to make an impact or not able to convince people and still valuing them, but then also still pushing for those things that I think really are important things to do. So I think that is probably enough of description based on what you asked, but maybe there's other things to say.
That's terrific, actually. Thank you so much, Dr. Nosek, for telling us about your career path. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.